Hello and welcome to the fifth and final day of our second week of Real Estate Live UK events. The week of events is brought to you by White Label, our partners and sponsors, and we've had such an amazing week of discussion ranging from Scotland to London to Cardiff to Belfast, and we're really excited this morning to be focusing on the Southwest and the growth and development that's taking place in the West Country. We've got a really fantastic panel with us this morning, and we're hoping that as many of you as possible are going to be engaging with us and putting your questions to the panel as well. We've been getting loads of audience participation this week, and we've been encouraging that by kickstarting all of our sessions with a poll. The poll will be coming up on your screen in a second, and it will be asking you what is the most important factor in unlocking development and ensuring the continued strength of UK real estate. So interesting to see whether the answers differ while we're looking down to the West Country, but we'll be comparing these results to a similar question we asked at our first event in June and sharing the results of this week and the previous time at the end of, well, today, being our final day. So I'll give you a few seconds to answer that. And in the meantime, at the bottom of your screens, you've got a Q&A function. So if you'd like to put any questions to the panel during the session, please use that. And Emma, Shone from Property Week, will be chairing the panel and be bringing as many of those questions into the conversation as possible. So without further ado, I will leave you with Emma, and we hope you enjoy the session. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you so much, Bonnie. Good morning, everybody, and happy Friday, and thank you for joining us. Welcome to this session on steering growth to the Southwest. I'm Emma Shone, and I'm the news editor of Property Week. Across the UK, we have the Northern Powerhouse, the Midlands Engine, and the Oxford-Cambridge Arc. But what is the combined pull, and what are the key drivers of growth for the Southwest or the Western Gateway? Over recent years, there have been initiatives in place to stimulate investment across the region. I'm here with this very esteemed panel this morning to discuss how successful these have been, where the Southwest is seeing significant development, and which sectors are predicted to expand its economy. So I am joined here today by Martin Bellamy, the Chairman and Co-Chief Executive of Gravity, Alex Hearn, Assistant Director for Placemaking and Growth, Development and Environment at North Somerset Council, Paul Williams, Director of National Offices for Bristol at Avison Young, and Stephen Peacock, Executive Director of Growth and Regeneration at Bristol City Council. I'm going to put a few questions to the panel to begin with, but we will be coming, as Bonnie said, to audience questions. So please use that Q&A box to your heart's content and ask everything that's on your mind. But for now, Alex, I'm going to start with you. And please could you just tell us a bit about North Somerset's regeneration, what the major growth areas are in terms of developments on site and the opportunities for the future?
Good morning. I suppose the main projects on site at the moment are around Weston Villages, which is a former airfield outside of Weston-super-Mare. Weston's growing quite rapidly and is on course to overtake Bath in the next few years as it sort of grows, and that's where a lot of our growth has been occurring for the last few years. I suppose looking to the future, I mean, we've got some infrastructure projects like Portishead Rail and a new bypass funded by HIF, and that will unlock opportunities. Portishead's quite an interesting one because there's a lot of brownfield land up there. And we're really interested in intensifying Weston-super-Mare town centre so it grows up, not just out.
Fantastic. What have been the catalysts for these developments?
So I suppose accommodating requirement for new homes. North Somerset's really constrained from a sort of environmental and planning perspective. So finding appropriate land for that is always a challenge for us, but we do it. I think the infrastructure projects coming are really unlocking potential, particularly I think that Portishead Rail project right into the town centre, a load of brownfield land, getting that right, because some development in Portishead has not been particularly great over the last 2 decades, but getting that right with a proper mix of uses that the community can buy into is a real opportunity for us. We're getting to grips with. Weston's interesting. I think what we've seen is not enough investment over the last few decades. A lot of it's underwritten by the public sector, but how can we really tell a story about how fabulous it is? Because it is an amazing place when you get there, and from a placemaking perspective and well-being, start to attract that private sector investment. So that's my main focus really, and we've just been through an exercise to really start telling a really good story about the town.
Fantastic. And was Banksy's Dismal Land a help or a hindrance for Weston?
So it was a help. I think it was really brave for us to do it. I think I suppose arguably what was a shame is from the outside looking in, what did we do after it? Because it was 5 years ago, I think almost this month that it happened.
Already? Oh my goodness.
But a lot's been going on a much more granular scale. And we now have so much sort of artistic and cultural activity. We've got a really strong partnership with Arts Council, Historic England. We've got a lot of stuff going on a much more granular scale, and we've been bequeathed a piece of art from Banksy that we will be working with him personally to put up in the town in the next year or so in a secret location. So Weston is full of creatives, so it's been really positive.
Fantastic. I have so many Banksy questions, so we must talk another time. And let's come to you, Stephen. Bristol is obviously already a thriving and dynamic city. Could you just tell us a bit about what projects are in the pipeline to really strengthen that offer as a destination for place people to live, work and invest?
Yeah, we're very fortunate as a city. We've got some great raw materials to work with. As you say, a successful, vibrant, dynamic city. We make a net positive contribution to the exchequer, unlike any other core city in England. So we're starting from a good place, but we're also we have some entrenched issues as a city. One of the most unequal cities in Europe. We have a housing crisis. The 13,000 families on the waiting list for housing, 1,200 people homeless or living in night shelters, and so housing is a key priority for us. We identified in our own portfolio over 100 hectares of land, of which in the last 3 years we've released over 70 hectares for development. And we are getting very much into house building. In fact, yesterday I was standing on a wasteland with George Clark and our mayor, launching another new initiative on directly built council houses. We have our own housing company, Gorham Homes, and we are working with, as you'd expect, every single developer, every single housing association to really push forward the house building agenda. We've got 7 areas in the city of growth and regeneration. So this obviously isn't all about housing, it's about jobs, as you say, and it's about making communities where people want to live, work and play. The most important of those is Temple Quarter. This is the area around Temple Mead Station, which is one of the top 3 regeneration venues in the UK now. We're looking at 10,000 houses, 22,000 jobs. And when it's all done in about 20 years' time, will be a 5% uplift to our region's GDP. It's a massive opportunity for the city and for the surrounding areas.
I was going to ask, what sort of overall developments are you looking for in the city on top of housing? But it sounds like you're really going for that mixed-use community piece that's so important at the moment.
Absolutely. I mean, there's a chronic shortage of high-quality office space in the city. Despite COVID, we see really strong signs that people are still seeing places like Bristol, albeit on a different basis, but still as a place where professionals and new businesses will want to set up and come. The usage might change, but we think the market will still be strong. You can get out to the countryside in about 5 or 10 minutes from the city centre of Bristol. So unlike bigger cities where you're locked in, and frankly, if you walk down Piccadilly in London, it's a bit of a wasteland. Bristol is actually pretty busy because people can get in and out very easily. So that employment land is a key issue for us as well, making sure we can service the demand. And obviously from a developer's point of view, that's good news. It means that there's lots to go at. We've got lots of interest, and people are continuing to come forward with plans, and we've seen no let up over the last 6 months in activity.
Brilliant. And speaking of office space and workspace that's coming forward, Martin, let's come on to you. Could you tell us a little bit about your smart campus, Gravity, and your involvement in the Southwest?
Yes, absolutely. So Gravity is a very important site, I think, for the Southwest. It's a large 650-acre site adjacent to Junction 23, the M5, so the Bridgewater Junction. And it has some really unique qualities. And I would say that from a point of view of its services to site, it's probably one of the most important sites in the UK, with a new road being built, the ability to restore rail to the site so that people will be able to access the site directly from Bristol. And also it has the benefit of almost unlimited power to site, which is very important in bringing forward these very large sites. Our vision for Gravity is based around the clean growth agenda. to develop an innovation campus, which is really, I would call it sort of California style innovation with a mix of work, live and play, where we're trying to attract businesses that are operating in what we call the super growth sectors. So electric vehicles, data, AI, robotics, research and development. And of course, the Southwest has got so many benefits. It's got a superb academic framework that sits around the M5 corridor, great connectivity. We're really, really excited about the future of Gravity, and also the fact that I think that it is big enough and significant enough as a site and as a business to move the needle and act as a catalyst for change in the Southwest.
Absolutely. And just on your point about the sort of occupier that you're looking to attract, are you working with any sort of household names at the moment that are looking to come to your campus?
Yeah, I mean, I think the short answer is yes, we are. There's a lot of misinformation in the market. There's a lot of hearsay about large companies relocating and going to various different large sites. A lot of that information doesn't actually lead to sort of fruition. But
are we talking about Tesla here?
Well, yeah, I mean, we're the site's been linked with Tesla and various other large companies, but I think the most important thing is the fact that the site is up and ready, and it also has the service capability for things like an electric vehicle battery gigafactory. So anything like that is obviously going to have a massive impact in the region, because it's not just about Gravity, it's about the huge ripple effect that bringing a super tenant like that to the region will have.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Actually, I should just mention in that vein, having the IAPS facility at Bath University, the electric vehicle propulsion unit, these are very, very powerful draws for international businesses looking to locate to the Southwest. It just cannot be underestimated.
Absolutely. And when do you think you'll be able to make announcements about the sort of people that have signed on to Gravity?
I think we'd like to think that we'll be making some announcements either in this fourth quarter or Q1 next year.
Oh, wow, so very advanced.
It's these things are always quite difficult to judge, because you can never really get inside the decision-making cycle. What you have to do is you just have to really promote the region and make sure that all of the people that need to know the benefits of the site and the region really do understand them properly.
Yeah, absolutely. And Paul, let's come to you, and you can give us sort of an agent's perspective on this workspace and office environment in the Southwest. Could you tell us a little bit about some of the projects that you've been involved with in the Southwest, and what you see as the main opportunities for the region?
Okay, yeah, so I think I would pick up on what Stephen said earlier on, which is that sort of following on from the fact that Bristol has always been seen as an attractive relocation prospect, particularly for people coming out of London. It is a lovely place to live and work. I'm an incomer myself, been here 30 years now, but it is a fantastic environment. And we expect that Bristol will benefit from the changes in working practices going forward. If larger corporate occupiers start to think about diversifying their locations out of London, then Bristol is extremely well placed to pick up some of those occupiers. In terms of what we've been involved in as an office, we're involved in most of the large schemes, I would say, that are ongoing in the region at the moment. Not Gravity, unfortunately, but we're involved in something called Cyber Central at Golden Valley, which is at Cheltenham, which is a large mixed-use development coming forward adjacent to GCHQ, which covers a total of 200 hectares, and it will be a mixed-use location with residential and up to 2 million square feet of commercial floor space there. And again, as Martin was saying, we're talking to a number of occupiers there at the moment. Nothing that I can announce today, but that's it's an extremely exciting project to be involved with. It's going to be a nationally significant cyber office park when it's developed. Closer to home in Bristol, Stephen mentioned Temple Quarter. And we're involved with the Temple Island site, the joint project between Legal and General and the City Council, again bringing forward a mixed-use development with circa 180,000 square feet of offices planned on the site there, plus housing, hotel, conference centre, various other facilities. And I think that speaks to this whole idea of community. So back in the day when Temple Quay was first developed, it was very much an office development with not much else on the site, just a little bit of retail and a pub. But the developments that are coming forward nowadays are very much seeking to develop that community feel with a mixed-use environment. So, it's not a ghost town overnight. There's life and activity and reasons for people to go there, even if they don't necessarily work in an office. So those are probably two of the big projects. The other, again, has been some slight controversy, I guess, but we're also involved on the planning side with the YTL project at Brabazon and the proposed Bristol Arena up there, which recently received planning permission. So again, another regionally significant development. Bristol has been crying out for an arena and a substantial concert venue for so many years. It will be amazing to see that come forward and to see all these things happen and further develop Bristol on the national map.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've already touched on the fact that there's a shortage of good grade A office space in Bristol. What's the background to that shortage, and do you think that's on the mend now?
I think what kick-started the shortage was probably circa 5 years ago now, when the government changed the rules and allowed permitted development to apply to converting office space into residential, which you're probably all familiar with. So Bristol lost in excess of 1 million square feet of secondary office space. So a lot of the tower blocks, the older tower blocks now, as you drive around the city centre, which used to be offices, are either residential or in many cases student accommodation. And that space was not replaced because clearly if developers build buildings, they're not going to build second-hand, older style office blocks. So whilst we've had some new development come forward, it's been relatively slow. A lot of it has been pre-let. So for example, we have 200,000 square feet being developed at on Temple Way at the moment, which has been pre-let to BT. So although it's new stock in the market, it's not coming forward. It won't be sitting there for people to move into. So I think the changes in planning were one big factor, and that was coupled with it was when the economy was starting to improve. So demand for offices was increasing, coupled with a massive reduction in supply. And the two things sort of came together and created a bottleneck. So rents have risen as a result, which is good because it then means developers can look at building buildings. It works financially for them if they can get the right sort of rents. But it also means that some of the buildings now, which might have been earmarked for conversion, are instead now being refurbished as offices because, again, a landlord can spend the money refurbishing the building and get a decent return on it as office space. Yeah. So the return point's really encouraging, but obviously the government is now looking to introduce a new wave of permitted development rights. Is that a concern that we're going to see a repeat of 5 years ago? Possibly. It's like everything else. It's the law of unforeseen consequences, isn't it? I think there were good reasons for doing what they did a number of years ago. The economy was in recession, and they wanted to encourage growth and development, coupled with the awareness that more homes were needed, and particularly bringing life back into city centres. So there were good motivations, but of course they possibly didn't foresee the kind of flood of conversions that then followed, and the impacts that has on the ability of businesses to grow and develop and invest, and create the jobs that the people living in those homes need. So you need a balance. I mean, again, you can understand the motivations at the moment of wanting to bring obsolete or unused premises into use. I guess we'll just have to wait and see what the effect of that is on the commercial property market.
Well, absolutely, and I get the impression as well that lessons have been learned on the PDR side of things. Obviously, they've just sort of applied the minimum space requirements, etc. So, Stephen, what are your thoughts on that? Are you confident that the office building is going to continue in Bristol?
Yes, I think it's holding up really well. I mean, the concern I would have about the proposed changes, relate more to affordable housing and that side of things. In terms of the office market, as I say, we still see a lot of interest, and things are continue to move. People are waiting certain, shall we say, planning guidance to come through. We have a bit of a challenge around the fact we have a very old local plan, which obviously we're trying to do something about, and we want to be able to provide more guidance, or at least point people in the right direction, because the challenge at the moment, as I say, is there's a lot of speculative stuff going on, but there's a lot of conditions that yet haven't been clarified in the city. Things like flood risk management, so that what the Environment Agency's position will be on a site. We've got to work all this stuff through. In fact, just to say, we launched a consultation, or are in the process this week of launching a major consultation on the flood mitigation strategy for the city. That sort of stuff, which is sort of the foundations of building investor confidence. We've got a lot to do to provide clearer direction to developers, and that's a big piece of work we're right in the middle of now.
Fantastic. And Alex, would you echo that view, just on sort of the infrastructure side of things and planning?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose everywhere thinks it's got an infrastructure deficit, and it's certainly, having moved from London myself up to the west of England and sat in a lot of traffic jams, I would echo that. And I think that I suppose my observation as a planner of the area is it's sort of grown in a sort of campus-like way over the years. When there's a new initiative, which could be an innovation centre or something like that, quite often a new building props up with a car park at the end of the road. And actually, what I really look forward to for the region, not just Bristol where I live, but the towns that I work in, that it really captures the walkable and cyclable future that we can have, and that for some of that, the infrastructure is already there. There's more that's needed, but I think that it is a very livable region, and actually perhaps rethinking the infrastructure we need a little bit sets up some real opportunities.
And I know that earlier this year, I think it was, the Campaign for Better Transport said that half of small towns in the southwest were transport deserts on the public transport side of things. And obviously, Martin, you're building your own train station and your own link to the M5. So was that a concern when you were looking at the southwest? And what are your views? What needs to be done on the transport link side of things?
I mean, I think that the future of mobility and the challenges around mobility are a challenge for the whole of the country. And I think that they will become, potentially more and more acute. I think where the Southwest has a real opportunity is to solve those issues. And as Stephen has said, to continue to make the Southwest an attractive place for people to work, live and play. And I think that there is a possibility, due to COVID and other reasons, that there will be what might be described as a decentralization. And if that does occur, then clearly we've got to be able to, in the Southwest, offer the mobility solutions that mean that people have a really high quality of life, and a better quality of life that they might otherwise have had in major urban conurbations like London. We're actually going through an LDO process on gravity at the moment, and clearly mobility is one of the biggest considerations, if not the biggest consideration. But I think as part of the clean growth agenda and the absolute necessity for it to be, I believe, the number one driving force, we've got to look at really innovative solutions around mobility and think out of the box as to how we solve them. And I think my bet is over the next 5 years, we're going to see a radical change to the way in which general mobility is looked at. And I think, all those great innovators in cities like Bristol, I know, are coming up with all sorts of exciting ideas as to how we make mobility a much, much more efficient and better experience.
Yeah, Stephen, you're nodding away there. Do you have anything to add to what Martin said?
Well, I mean, this is obviously what we look at more as a city dynamic, and recognise as someone who lives in a village that there are two very different paradigms. But within the city, yes, absolutely, because we have a climate emergency and an ecological emergency. We've got species collapse. We've got in the city we've declared our net zero carbon ambition. All of that ties into getting people around the city in ways that frankly, clean up the air, because we also have illegal levels of air quality in the city. When you think about developments and you think about how people are going to live, we're all trying to bring communities back into the cities. We're trying to make it, the 15-minute city idea. We are looking, as most places are, the repurposing of our city centre with what's happened to retail. So, we're trying very hard to make sure that we put all of these things into the mix. And to Alex's point, that we don't just simply, build something and then, put a car park next to it. I mean, those days have to be over. The interconnectedness of all of these systems, is incredibly complex. And it's why sometimes things take a long time. If you look at the overlapping needs to address all of these issues, and I mentioned again, inequality and exclusion in our city, where Bristol has the biggest intra-city disparity in wealth terms of any of the core cities. So we have to try and place jobs and growth where people who are traditionally excluded can get to those opportunities, and make sustainable means of accessing those, just part of everyone's life, whether that's obviously buses or mass transit, which we're looking at a strategic mass transit investment for our city, or of course cycling and walking. So it's complex.
But a really terrific point. Please, yeah, absolutely, Martin.
Because I think that's a really, really good point. I mean, to me, one of the most important things across the country is we look to create jobs where we're building houses. And I think it's slightly pointless to look at large-scale housing developments where we're not creating good quality jobs next to those housing developments, because if we don't, we're going to create further mobility problems. And I think in the future, we have to create environments where people can work and live in close proximity, which will take a lot of pressure off the transport networks, and to create environments which are safe, which are clean, and which are fun to be a part of. When people talk about the clean growth transition and the climate emergency, actually it's rapidly turning into a business emergency, because businesses are going to have to reinvent themselves. They're going to have to change their practices, and they are going to have to make this transition to clean growth, and that is a business emergency.
Absolutely. And Stephen said the three magic words a little earlier on: net zero carbon. When will Gravity be net zero carbon?
Well, net zero carbon is one of the most badly abused terms there is, and it is defined in many different ways by many different people. Our ambition is that we need to be net zero from the start. And obviously we have got a huge advantage, because we're able to take advantage eventually of the Hinkley Point power when it comes online. But there is not one aspect of anything that we do on Gravity that can't be modeled around clean growth. And even if we get absolutely everything right, we're still going to struggle to be at net zero by the definition of what net zero is. So we need to focus everything we do on clean growth. We need to get to as close to net zero as we can. We need to be audited, as I think all businesses will be audited, just like they're audited by an accountant. They'll be audited around their clean growth credentials. The starting point is we have to be at net zero, and we always have to stay at net zero.
Absolutely. And Paul, over at Cyber Central, do you have similar thinking around the zero carbon movement?
Yeah, so sustainability obviously is key to any new development of this nature coming forward. I mean, it has to be, clearly just in terms of public opinion, I suppose, but, and corporate social responsibility, etc. It's clearly key. I mean, with the Navis and Young, we've made a commitment that all our offices will be net zero emissions by 2030. And there's a strong focus on, diversity, inclusion, wellness, sustainability. These are all themes which are increasingly coming out of the business community. And I think there's been a sea change in thinking. Perhaps 10 years ago, there may have been an element of box ticking with a lot of companies thinking, well, we need to be seen to be ticking these boxes. But I genuinely think now there is proper leadership coming out of the business community, and an understanding that these things matter, for all of our children. It's you can't afford to ignore it. And developments won't succeed, if they don't have these things at the core.
And who should be leading the way on this? Should it be the public or the private sector, Paul?
I think clearly the public sector has a strong role to play in terms of giving a lead, but I think the private sector, is driven by the need to make profit. But I think there's now an increasing understanding that in order to make that profit, you have to be operating in a sustainable way. I'm sure there are. I'm sure there's a scale in terms of how people approach that. But I really think in my business career, things have changed substantially. And just going back to the sort of cycling, Bristol is a cycling city. You wouldn't necessarily think so, because of the hills. But I've been in this business long enough to remember when every new development, there was a big battle in terms of planning with how many car parking spaces could be delivered within the building. And there was conflict between the planners trying to restrict the number and the developers trying to increase the number. We're seeing fewer and fewer car spaces being delivered now with new developments. And that's, it's a combination of planning policy, but it's also a recognition that you just can't keep delivering car spaces for people to drive into city centres. It's not viable going forward. So within Avison Young, we're marketing a scheme in Glasgow called CADworks, which has 0 parking. It's the first one I've come across with literally no parking spaces on site for the occupiers, but that's definitely the way things are going to go in city centres. People will be expecting to come in. People no longer expect to drive to work in the way that they used to and park underneath the building. So these, I suppose the point I'm making is these changes take a little bit of time. It feels to me as if the process of change is accelerating because people are, Stephen mentioned that, the climate emergency, species collapse, all of these things are massive in the public consciousness now. And the new generations coming through, my children coming into the workplace, they're going to demand better. They're just going to expect more from their employers in terms of the way they respond to these issues.
Yeah, thank you. So I just want to move us on to just a bit of bigger picture. Obviously, that's huge picture thinking. Sorry, that's the wrong way to put it. But I want to talk about this term, the Western Gateway, because obviously the Northern Powerhouse and the Midlands Engine and now the Oxford-Cambridge Arc is very much the topic at the moment. And I think is it fair to say that the Western Gateway doesn't necessarily get the airtime that it deserves? Stephen, do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, it's new. It's very much early days in terms of its currency as an entity. It's not a legal entity. It's a partnership, but it is a response to, I think, what we need to be able to speak to government about and, frankly, make things simple for people to understand. So the Western Gateway is an area that's effectively Swindon to Swansea, Gloucestershire to Weston-super-Mare. That area is 100 billion economy, 4.5 million people. As I say, it recognises actually the natural economic geography of the area. So we've been talking about Cyber Central. That feels very adjacent to the work I do in Bristol. Cheltenham's not far at all. The universities of Bristol and Cardiff they work incredibly closely together, and obviously the M5 and M4. You can easily see how that all hangs together with the rail network. So it just makes sense. And for us, it allows us to look at that bigger picture. So if you consider the scale of the economy, and obviously Martin's in that area as well, just down near Bridgewater. So, you can talk in terms of major economic development initiatives. So clean growth would be the thing that we want to be famous for. We already are, if you actually add up the things we do as a region, and if you look at the intellectual academic strength, the business interest, the inward investment that's happened, it is an opportunity to really be distinctive. And as I say, when you're talking to ministers, keep things simple is generally a good idea. Connectivity, so making sure we can get people around the area, up and down, in and out, obviously very important, as is, I think, the focus around it, clean growth, but also on innovation. And finally, I think the piece that we want to emphasize is internationalization, particularly in a post-Brexit world. How do we make sure that we punch above our weight, if possible, in terms of international trade and inward investment? So the response has been very good from government. It is early days. We have a chair in Catherine Bennett, who's the UK boss of Airbus. So we have a good foundations, and we're going to be starting to put bids into government for significant investment across that geographical area.
It sounds really exciting.
We'll be hearing more about it.
Yeah, no, well, I look forward to hearing more as we go forward. Alex, can you give us a North Somerset perspective on what you think the Western Gateway's USP is going to be in comparison to all the other geographies across the country?
So I think, I suppose, existentially, it's very much ground up. You know, this has come out the region. It's not been sort of overtly sponsored by a chancellor from the beginning. It's not been dragged out the region. We've created it ourselves, and I think that in itself sets it in good stead, because you know, we're creating the expectation and the vision ourselves. I think as from North Somerset's perspective, we are, you know, we're largely a commuter area. We've got some large and growing towns, but our economy very much reflects that of the UK. We have some really good growing sectors and some really good growing development areas, but we are a relatively wealthy area with people working in, or historically anyway, working in cities. So I think what's really interesting is that if we can bake in and capture that clean, inclusive growth that we're speaking about, but and supported by the academic powerhouses in the area as well, but those people aren't necessarily having to drive everywhere. I think that sets up something really exciting about inclusive growth across that wider region, because, you know, we'll live all over the place, and how this influences the sort of behaviours of individuals competing in the labour market and businesses competing for those skills. We all need really skilled people to do whatever it is we want to do, and they always live somewhere else from where we are, and actually
I'm afraid we're losing you a little bit there, Alex. Oh,
having
we got you back.
that vision
No.
in.
Okay, Alex, we've lost your connection a little bit. I'm sorry. I'm gonna cut you off just so that we're not sat waiting for it to right itself. We'll give it a minute to recover. Martin, I know you have some feelings about what the Western Gateway should mean and what its targets should be.
I think the Southwest has an enormous opportunity to really properly put the flag in the ground and champion itself as the clean growth centre for the UK. I think the task should not be underestimated. I think it's really significant. I mean, the Northern Powerhouse and the Midlands Engine, as we all know, had very, very significant political backing from some real political heavyweights. But those two initiatives were born in a different era. Things have moved on very rapidly, and I would really look at the Ox-K mark as if you like, the sort of direct competition. But Bristol and Bath and these other great cities in the Southwest have got innovation coming out of their ears. I mean, I often speak at events in the West Country, and I'm staggered by the amount of innovation that is there. But I think that, really it's going to need a significant champion to lobby central government and to really take a top-down approach, because obviously the bottom-up approach is great, but it needs really, really significant political clout to put the Southwest on the map as the clean growth capital of the UK. And that's where the future is. I mean, if we're not careful, we will miss a trick, because all of these other areas have got their eye on the same goal. And so there are some, I think there are some initiatives that we should be taking in the Southwest. Firstly, we need to get that positioning right, but also we need to work really hard to attract some of these global businesses to the Southwest, which will act for the catalyst for change. I mean, we hear every day in the news that the UK needs between 4 and 8 lithium-ion battery gigafactories. Well, it's a fact. We are so far behind in the electric vehicle production area. It's quite frankly embarrassing. Now, the Southwest must make sure that it lands one of those opportunities, because that will transform a local economy, but it will also give the area a massive push in the direction of clean growth, because it's not just about electric vehicles, it's about everything else that's associated with that. So I think that this is really urgent now for the Southwest to really put its hand up and try and capture the high ground when it comes to the transition to a clean economy.
Absolutely. So I'm going to move to a couple of audience questions, and Stephen, I'm going to put one that's come in to you. How problematic is it that North Somerset hasn't joined the West England Combined Authority for the Western Gateway idea, do you think?
I don't think it's problematic for the Western Gateway at all, because, as I said before, we've got Gloucestershire, we've got Wiltshire, we've got South Wales in it. So this is there's always multiple layers in a democracy. We live in a democracy where stuff moves around, and our job is to kind of make sure that that doesn't stop proper collaboration. Economic geography doesn't obey administrative boundaries, never has, never will. Economic geography is much more formed over hundreds of years by rivers, then railways, and possibly even the direction the wind blows when you have smokestacks in the East End of London. These things are the things that really make the difference, and we are, as people working in the public sector, frankly, have to get with that and work on the basis of what is pragmatic and sensible. So it doesn't make a difference.
Yeah, Alex, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, I'd just echo that, really. I mean, things change. I mean, the west of England area, the combined authority area, or the LEP area, is politically very diverse, and like anywhere else in the country, it will always change. We still collaborate on pretty much everything. I mean, I have probably 4 or 5 meetings with counterparts at WECA authorities every week on everything from delivering growth to cycling to regeneration, all sorts of things. So it would, I think ideally we would be in, and our current leader has declared that, but we're not. But it doesn't stop us working collectively. We are a region. People don't know, I don't know the real shape of Bristol as a Bristol resident, and nor would many residents of North Somerset. You don't know when you cross the administrative line. We're a fluid region, really.
Absolutely. Cool. All right, I'm just going to move on. We've got a question from an anonymous attendee. Paul, I'll come to you, but then Martin, I suspect you might have something to say on this one as well. So this person has asked, you are talking about attracting occupiers focused on innovation. I've heard about 20 places say that recently. Do you have a focus on particular sectors or some unique reason why innovators should come to the Southwest? Paul, can we start with you?
Yeah, that's a tricky one. I mean, I think, innovation is a buzzword, isn't it? We all like to perhaps think that we're more innovative than we are. I think Bristol and the Southwest region genuinely does have a reputation for innovation. It has been, I've heard it referred to as the Silicon Valley of the West, because of the history of technology, particularly around the sort of North Bristol fringe. I mean, gravity clearly, will have its own gravity. I mean, it's just such a massive scale of development. And looking at the proposed cyber central at Golden Valley, the location linked to GCHQ, people still like to locate together. So like attracts like, I think they say. So Bristol has a particular reputation now for the creative and media sector. There's an awful lot of innovation, in that whole sector. It's very young, it's very vibrant. People are coming in with new ideas all the time. And I think I'm waffling clearly, but I think Bristol does have a strong reputation for attracting innovative industries. We have the connectivity, both in terms of the investment in the broadband infrastructure that can support those sort of businesses. And we have the strong universities with the 2 universities in Bristol and Bath, but also in the wider region. And an awful lot of people that come through those universities stay in the region. So they bring, they bring their own innovation ideas, they create their businesses, and they stay and they grow within this region. So I think there is a genuine case to be made for the Southwest as a centre of innovation.
Martin, I'm sure you'd agree.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are 2 parts to the anonymous question. I think the first one is why do we hear about innovation 20 times or 20 different places? The reason being is because, you know, the UK is one of the best countries in the world when it comes to innovation. I mean, that is a fact. We're not actually very good at commercializing innovation historically, but we are great innovators. And the transition to the clean economy, the global economy is forecast to double between now and 2050. So we've got to build a new economy, world economy, the size of the one we have today, and it's got to be based on clean growth. And we've got to re-engineer the old economy, and that is going to take enormous innovation. And I would point people towards the government's report, Absolute Zero, that talks about what it takes to get to absolute zero. And if you read that report, by the time you get 5 pages in, it frightens the life out of you, because what it says is that we have got to reinvent and innovate in every single part of our economy. So that's the answer to the first part of the question. The second one is why the Southwest? Well, amongst other things, you know, the Southwest is one of the most beautiful parts of the country. Added to that is it has a lot of untapped capability and ability. And if we are going to see people believe in the fact that they can work in different parts of the country, they can take advantage of the beauty of different parts of the country, then what we've got to do is we've got to placemake. We've got to build homes. We've got to create jobs in the same place. And we can't just say, well, if we don't do anything, will they come? The answer is no. If we build it, will they come? I believe the answer is yes. And
I think that's particularly, sorry, Martin, I think that's particularly relevant at the moment, isn't it? With much discussion around people leaving the big cities, moving away from London after COVID and being able to work from home or want to just be based in a smaller community. Stephen, do you think that's a trend that is going to benefit the Southwest?
Absolutely. And I just would echo Martin's point, because certain parts of our region would have been called the graveyard of ambition, not long ago. One of the challenges that you face in certain industries that you might be attracted to a place like Bristol, but then, if you're relatively early on in your career and you decide you want to move to your next job, can you find your next job in Bristol? And that's why, from a citizen's point of view, having good quality clusters of, excellent innovation and good businesses is so important, because it keeps the ecosystem working. We do have, as Paul said, we have some great examples of that in and around the region. We have the silicon design, semiconductor design history out of post Inmos, which to Martin's point, the thing is, those companies, to my mind, got sold off too young. But there's lots of them that got sold off for lots of money. There are relatively few UK success stories like ARM was, and that's a contentious story in the history of our economy. But that's what we could have here in Bristol and the Southwest. We need government and business and investors to working together to build those clusters and to frankly invest in them and make sure there's patient capital and people who are actually going to stay, frankly, not look at their exit by the time they've done it for 5 years. Build those big businesses. That's how we create those deep supply chains, those big clusters, and the gravitas of this world are the places where this stuff can happen. So I'm very and from a Bristol point of view, what a great city to live in as well, to be able to live and forge a career and enjoy the wider Southwest is I think a great proposition, and I feel very optimistic about it.
Fantastic.
I was very briefly going to say, sorry, there is, just thinking about Bristol as well, though, there is really, really important, isn't it, that the whole community is brought along with it, the whole population, because there is a lot of, I think Stephen mentioned, we were talking earlier on, just the sort of equality issue, and there are large areas of Bristol that are not currently sort of being brought along with the innovation and creativity and opportunity that's there. It's fantastic to talk about inward investment and growth and bringing people to the region. But that, we need to make sure, don't we, that that's not at the expense of the people already in the region that actually need that opportunity themselves.
Yeah, that's an absolutely key point. And it brings us really nicely to the closing question for this session. That flew by, didn't it? So I'm just going to put the same question to all four of you now. What will be the most important factor in ensuring continued growth and development in the Southwest? Reasonably brief answers. You've got about 2 minutes each. Martin, should we start with you?
I think the biggest factor in the Southwest is that although COVID is having a dreadful impact on the economy, the opportunities, the business opportunities in the UK, I believe, are very, very significant. It is going to need to mean that, you know, some people will need to change jobs, reskill and everything else. But the thing that's going to have the biggest impact in the southwest by a long way is the opportunities that will be afforded to the region by the necessity to transition to a clean economy.
Sure, thank you. Alex?
So I agree with what Martin's just said, but I'd add to it technology and that accessibility to full fibre, which is rolling out in parts of the region. I think that when you combine that with the quality of the living environment in a lot of our places, can really spread growth beyond the sort of core cities and the core towns. I think we could see a lot of spreading as people effectively live much more where they want, as opposed to proximity to city centres and town centres.
Digital infrastructure is actually something we've not touched on it in a big way in this session, and obviously it's a huge part of cities and places and businesses and all sorts going forwards. Alex, how much of a priority is building that digital infrastructure for North Somerset?
It's a major priority. So we've just agreed our sort of new economic plan for as a response to the pandemic, and digital is one of the, you know, clean digital and people focused is what's at the heart of that. And we've got projects underway to accelerate full fibre in our towns, and it's absolutely critical. And I think will make you know, for towns like ours, which now suddenly have many more people working in them than they had 6 months ago, it'd be absolutely critical. So it's really important to us.
Yeah, and is it a similar story at Bristol Council, Stephen?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, obviously, being a city, we have a slightly different dynamic in some respects with regard to fibre and connectivity. But I do want to just pick up the point of exclusion and digital exclusion, because the challenge, and it links to your question, your previous question, which is, you know, what does the future hold? And I see all of the things Martin said. How, in addition, we've got a large number of people who've been left behind. You know, we can't ignore the fact that there have been several cries for help through the ballot box recently from a bunch of people who feel they're not getting a fair share in the growth that's happened over the last 20 years in this country. So let's not forget that social cohesion really matters, and making sure that the future of work has a future for all of our citizens is for me the thing that people never quite get to when they talk about these opportunities. They can see the sunlit uplands, but remember, we live in real societies, and that to me is a challenge. And digital is one of those such examples. If you live in one of the leafier bits of Bristol, you've already got full fibre. Try accessing the internet if you live in South Bristol in a housing estate. It's really a digital divide that's going to grow, and that's the fear that we need to address. We need to name it. How do we give everybody a stake in this future economy we're going to build?
Yeah, really, really important point. And is that your answer as well to the most important factor in continued growth and development?
Yeah, because I'm not complacent about the need to do everything Martin has said. I totally agree, but neither am I complacent about the fact that will trickle down somehow to give everyone a stake. And if we don't get the latter bit right, we have a challenge as a whole society, not just an economy.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. All right, Paul, you've got to top it with something more epic than that, I'm afraid.
No, well, this is old chestnut, I suppose, from a property consultant, is the planning system. You know, the planning system still too often seems to work against growth and development, whilst clearly there need to be controls. I think, you know, from our perspective, often the kind of speed to delivery from inception to you know, a scheme coming out of the ground is just too slow. And that, which means, apart from anything else, it's harder for the economy to react in the way that it needs to the, you know, to the demands coming on it. There's always a lag. You know, there's just it is a perennial sort of bugbear, and it's not a complaint to any specific person. I think it's just the system and resource and all these things come together. But that's definitely a challenge that could hold back growth, I think, for the future.
Okay, brilliant. Well, thank you so much to all four of you for joining us this morning for what I think has been a really interesting discussion. Some really key points raised here, and I'm looking forward to seeing Gravity and other schemes like yours, Paul, coming out of the ground, and seeing the Western Gateway in the headlines more. Let's get it out there. Cool. Well, thank you so much for joining us. As I said, I've been Emma Shone, and I will hand back over to Bonnie.
Thanks, Emma. Thank you so much to our panel for joining us this morning. I think that was such an interesting discussion, and echo Emma that we'd be excited to see more about the Western Gateway coming forward in events like these in the future. So yeah, hopefully look out for that potentially when Real Estate Live returns in February. So watch this space. Just to give you an update on the polling results for this session, interestingly, there was a tie for first place between three of the topics that we talked about most during this session. So investment in transport infrastructure, investment in technology and digital infrastructure, and Martin will be pleased, building a carbon zero sustainable future, which is obviously also one of the most important topics, and that actually was our results winner in June. So it's good to see that that is still a priority for everybody, and something that we have been considering in all our panels. So thanks, Emma, for bringing that out in the session. Just to let you know, audience, for what's happening next in Real Estate Live, we've got 2 more panels before we finish our last week of events. Later on today, we'll be looking at the future of the high street in a panel, and then we'll also be talking about the regeneration of seaside towns across the UK. So a couple more panels for you today, and then we'll be sharing the videos of the sessions that took place this week online, write-ups of the session, and we'll be back in February. So thank you all again to our panel, and thank you to Emma for hosting. That's great.